All right, welcome everyone. Please get some pizza if you have not already gotten pizza. Change the pace for Zube. Our post midterm Zube, we have new snacks for you. So hope you enjoy that. Welcome back. Hope you had a nice week off last week. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Dunn. I'm a lecturer in regional planning here. I'm the Zube faculty coordinator. Zube, as you know, is a lecture series that is supported by a generous endowment by Irv and Margaret Zube, former chair of our departments. And usually we use this endowment to bring in some excellent speakers from off of campus, from around the country, sometimes around the world. But today we're very fortunate to welcome two excellent speakers from right on campus and right in the building, in fact. So we're very happy today to have Henry Renski and Camille Barchers, both planning faculty in our department here. Their talk today, What Do Planners Need to Know, is a great example of their work connecting planning, the Planning Academy and planning practice, done together also with Jamal Green, who you can introduce yourselves as you like. But yes, we're very happy to have them here. Please join me in welcoming Camille, Professor Camille Barchers and Professor Henry Renski.
Thank you, Peter. Can everyone hear me? To my undergrad students, you thought you got out of hearing me today since we did not have class, but lucky you get to hear me anyway. And to my graduate students, I hope that you will find this really insightful as you all prepare for the job market. So as Peter mentioned, this is part of a larger project that Henry and I are doing with Jamal Green, who is one of our co-authors on another paper, and he is at UPenn, and he is here with us in spirit, though not in person. So we'd like to start with some of our motivations for why we are asking the question, what do planners need to know? And as you saw from the first slide, you'd think I would know the answer to that question, as I am sort of in charge of telling potential new planners what they should know. But raise your hand if you are a planner in this room. My graduate students better have their hands, right? Okay, the next question is, how do you know you're a planner? Does anyone want to share why they raised their hand, how you know you're a planner?
Because I stared him down.
Other than us staring you down. Amelia, how do you know you're a planner?
Working in a planning department?
Excellent, yeah, so you're working in a planning department and your title is?
City planner.
City planner, so that's one way to know. Does anyone have a different way of knowing? So we all have titles. I think that I'm a planner because at many points in my life I've been called a planner, and also I am an assistant professor of planning. But it's actually a much harder question than it seems, right? There's lots of ways we might think about the word planning and the act of planning. And there's lots of other people who have tried to answer this question, what do planners need to know, or what is the planning profession, is a different way of asking that same question. And so we are not the first to ask this question. So when we started thinking about this topic, we looked at the other literature out there. And this is a sort of brief overview of what's out there, ranging from 2007 through 2019. And the folks who have come before us and asked this question have tried to answer it in a variety of ways. Most of them are conducting surveys or interviews of planning educators, so people like me and Henry, or planning practitioners, so people like Amelia who work as planners. Some of these studies have also looked at planning schools, so places like UMass, and they've tracked over time the courses that we've offered, the concentrations and specializations that we've offered, and have tried to draw from that an idea about what the planning field includes and how it's changed. But in general, all of these have been conducted with sort of a self-selected small group of people or programs that already self-identify as planners. And they're all pretty limited in their methodological approach to answering this question. It won't surprise you all if you know me, I'm a very practical person, that I thought, Henry, we could save a lot of time and effort if we, instead of writing this paper, just used Google. So I Googled, what do planners need to know and what are planners? And our professional association, the American Planning Association, has the answer. So I don't know why I didn't stop here. And they basically say that there's sort of two groups of things planners need to know, but they lump them all under this idea of what skills do planners need. And they have sort of an idea about content knowledge that we all need as planners, in general, the way cities work, the legal foundations of land use, the interaction between economy, transportation, health, and human services. And then they say that there's a group of skills that planners have to have, and those include things that many of you are familiar with: analyzing socio-demographic data, using GIS, communicating to audiences, the sort of typical planner skill set. But like I said, I was not really satisfied with this answer, so I kept going. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, Google AI, and Reddit all had answers for me. Also, not quite satisfying, but the AI one says that a planner is a professional who designs cities and communities to meet the needs of their residents. So I thought, okay, this is broad but helpful. We could go with this. But Henry and I wanted to take the approach that a planner is what a planner does. And what does a planner actually do? What are you doing in your day-to-day life as a planner? So I Googled that, and I used Google image search so I could actually see what planners are doing. And it turns out that all planners are doing all the time is sitting around a table and pointing at things. And as you saw with the first slide, my students and I were doing that too, so it tracks. And really interesting, this is not just a domestic US construction of planning. This is from the Japanese government webpage talking about what city planners do. So across the world, city planners sit around or stand around tables and point at maps and images. So there's your answer. So then we had another question that we thought, well, maybe we could Google this and find out, which is, how does planning differ from other professions? Planning shares a lot of skills and activities with things like civil engineering, architecture, landscape architecture, public administration, and geography. And what I found when I was Googling all of these things is that sometimes planners stand next to other people in other fields. But I wanted to make just a quick note here. Google seems to suggest that although we're different from these professions, we also as planners wear hard hats a lot. And I've been a planner for now 20-something years, and I have never, ever once worn a hard hat. So a lot of confusion here when you rely on Google to answer this question. So Henry finally talked me off the ledge of getting around writing this paper and using Google, and said that there had to be another way for us to look at this question. And this is an obvious suggestion from Henry, who is a methodologist at his core. And so one of the reasons why we embarked on this project was to see if we could use a new data source that had not been used to answer this question, and a new method with this data source to answer this question. So I will let Henry explain what we did and how much fun it was.
Thank you, Dr. Barchers.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? And thank you to my students that came and faculty and the second year planning students. All right, so as Camille explained, I'm a methodologist. We both kind of share an interest in kind of using new data sources and new methodologies to explore, sometimes new questions, but sometimes existing questions. And this question of planner identity is one that goes back mainly in the planning theory literature to basically the origins of the profession, right? And so we take a little bit more of a data science approach, and our primary data source for understanding what planners do are looking at job ads. And so nowadays, all job ads are basically posted on the internet. There's a variety of different, different providers of job ads. We use the two primary job boards that are specifically oriented towards planning as a profession. That is the American Planning Association as well as PlanEdizen. And so those are two national sources that basically post job ads. And as my quantitative method students will probably be thinking about, where are the biases in this? Which we can talk about later, but I don't want to get too heavy into methods, right? But basically, We scraped over 14,000 job ads from these two sources. We did a lot of data cleaning, making sure that there were no duplicate ads. Sometimes they get posted in both places, sometimes they get posted in one place multiple times. Cleaned up the data quite a bit. And really what we're talking about here is a variety of analytical methodologies that kind of group into this idea of analyzing text and narrative as data. And so this here, I know you can't read it, I'm not expecting you to, this is a job ad, right, for a planner that was taken from the American Planning Association website. And you can see, it says, Town of Jackson. I pulled this one because, where is it? Mike, what's in Jackson, Wyoming?
Great skiing.
That's right. Seems like a place I might want to go. But, and they're looking for a principal planner, and they describe, how to apply for the job, what the job requirements are, as well as what skills and what types of knowledge they're expecting in the person that they hire, right? So that's what essentially we're doing. We're analyzing systematically job ads as data, looking for the different skills that they're looking for in the planners that they're going to hire. And also the different types of specialized knowledge, or as Camille was saying earlier, APA calls that kind of content. Content knowledge, specialized knowledge, things like that. And without getting too heavy into the methodology, it basically involves breaking down these job ads into groups of phrases. And then what we do is we match those phrases to a known and very extensive database of job skills. And so that extensive database of job skills comes from Lightcast. I do a lot of workforce development work. They're very well known in the area of, helping economic development and workforce development folks understand trends in the labor force. So they have a very extensive, it's like 30,000, maybe almost 40,000 phrases that they use that describe job ads, describe job skills. And so we use that to basically pull out the skills from job ads. I have a little bit of a demonstration. I just did this one by hand. It wasn't one of the computer-assisted ones we did. But you read through a job ad, and there's skills that are listed. I have kind of some of the main skills that I know that code onto the Lightcast database highlighted in yellow. And then the green ones are not skills per se, but more of areas of knowledge that the computer would pick up. And part of what we've done, in addition to using kind of this existing database, we also developed our own typology, because the Lightcast Skills Dictionary doesn't really relate to planning. It's general. It covers all jobs, right? And so it makes a lot of mistakes. And so we spent a lot of time, probably the most time, developing our own typology. So we basically use Lightcast to identify the skills. And then what we've done is used a variety of different data sources to kind of group those skills into what we call skill groups and skill families that relate to planning. And so here we're building upon the precedent literature, most of which was done through surveys of planning practitioners and academicians, right? And so, we have, the skill families are the ones in italics, interpersonal social interaction skills, communication skills, research, technical, and analytical skills, yada, yada, yada. And then the groups are a little bit more detailed that fall underneath that, right? And then there's an even bigger level of detail underneath these groups, which are the specific skill terms that show up in the ads, right? But there's tens of thousands of them, so too much to really analyze individually. And so in analyzing these job ads, we're basically scraping every ad that came through from essentially 2017 up until, well, for this paper we stopped at 2023, but we're still scraping, right? And so assuming that APA and Planeta Zen together are at least grossly representative of people looking for planners in the United States, right? We don't expect them to be all planning jobs in the United States, right? But if we assume that they're at least somewhat representative of the market for planners, we see these fluctuations. What's going on here, this is COVID, right? There's a huge drop in the amount of people that are advertising for planning jobs. But then after COVID, you had this huge rebound, in the market for professional planners, right? And we took out all the ads for, things like professors and stuff like that. So these are really people looking for professional planners or people in planning-related positions, okay? And if I was, I know what it looks like after August of 2022. I wanted to keep it constrained to the period of the data that we're showing here for consistency, but I can tell you that it's gone down a little bit from there, but it's still higher than it was pre-COVID. But it's been pretty consistent. So it's still a pretty robust market for planners out there. But most of the attention of this paper is kind of looking at the skills themselves. So again, kind of going by my skill groups and my skill families, one of the things that we showed in this paper was well, what are the skills that employers are looking for? And here what I'm doing is I'm kind of showing things at the skill group level. Now you can see, right, organization and staff management is actually the #1 skill group that is listed in these ads, right? That is followed by quant methods people, research and investigation, right? So when you're questioning whether or not you should even be in my class, and then there's some even more technical skills that follow further down on the list. Now this is, I think, maybe the top 20. There's an even longer list than this, right? But, writing and editing, communication skills, oral communication skills are pretty high up there. Yeah, public speaking, initiative and leadership is pretty high. Project management, right? So organizational management is different than project management. Yada, yada, yada. And when we look at this, aside from just listing kind of these groups that come out as the most dominant skills that employers are looking for, we're also trying to get a sense, again, of this bigger issue. It's like, well, what's the alchemy here? What are the mix of things that people are looking for in planners? And, my takeaway from looking at this is that, look, within the context of all the different ads, there's not one dominant skill family. There's not one dominant skill group. Yes, the largest one is organization and staff management, but research and investigation is also huge, and those are typically more technical skills. Writing and editing, public speaking, those are communication skills, right? Initiative and leadership, that is, one of the ones that we're calling a kind of more of a personality. They're like looking for certain character traits. All of these things show up in the dominant skills that employers are looking for. So what employers are really looking for is a mix. They want people that have strong technical skills, but they also want people with organizational and managerial and administrative skills. They're looking for people that also can write well, but also can do public communication, right? That can present to audiences and have strong interpersonal skills as well. This is the alchemy of the planner, right? Now, this one gets really complicated, but I'll explain it very simply. We also recognize that employers look for different things depending upon whether you're just starting out in the profession or whether or not you have been there forever, right? So we basically divided the ads into the ones that were looking for entry-level positions, versus ads that were looking for what we call kind of mid-level career positions versus senior and higher administration positions, okay? And one of the limitations of the existing literature on this topic is they don't actually make that distinction. They just survey planners. And so what they're ending up is getting a result that's kind of like the median planner, which is often a mid-career person. But what we train people for in academia is primarily entry-level positions. But the type of training that somebody might want if they're trying to upgrade their skills to get a more senior level position, those might be different things, right? It's a different world. And so what we find when we break these things down by those, right? So by mid-level, that's the, I want to say teal, yeah, tealish,
I'll buy it.
close enough. Senior is a little bit more red, and kind of off yellow is entry. So these are made to be relative to one another. So because I'm short, I can only reach this bottom one, which is transportation modeling, right? But transportation modeling primarily is more mid-level skill. You find that more often in mid-level ads, right? You do find it somewhat in entry, but it's not really asked for among senior level positions. And so the main story that comes out of here is that the more technical and research-oriented the skill, those skills are more important for entry-level positions. Managerial skills, especially project management, becomes more relevant as you move into mid-career, right? And then stuff like leadership and, and also some, personnel management, that is the domain of the senior planner positions. Or even beyond senior, people that are moving from actual planner positions into being the executive director positions for a planning organization. So there is like a life cycle to the types of things that they look for. Now that doesn't mean that they don't look for, even though, I'm looking at research and investigations, right? So that is one that near the top, high on entry level, but they still look for that in senior and mid-career. It's just it's dominant in entry level, right? What we really find is that these skills get repeated over and over again regardless of level, right? Everybody wants good communication skills. Everybody wants people with good interpersonal relationship skills. Those things are pretty ubiquitous. And so part of the analysis is also looking at which skills go together, right? And so, my quant students, this is a type of something that we're going to do in a little while. It's a type of a correlation matrix. It's basically looking for the associations, which skills get mentioned in the same ads as other skills. So what ones go together, right? And this can, again, get very complicated, but I think that what you find is that regardless of the ad, the most common skill groups often end up appearing together in ad after ad. Managerial skills, research skills, management skills, writing and editing, public speakers, and technical skills. They always show up together, right? And the other thing that we find is that you often see this blending of hard and soft skills. So that's like pairing research and investigation with writing and public speaking. They go together, right? Even though they're often thought of as different things. The other part of what we did is not just look at skills, but look at areas of content knowledge or specialized knowledge. And so we organized these somewhat within the way that planners typically think of our kind of specialized areas of expertise. Land use regulation and zoning, community development and housing, planning, law and code enforcement, economic development, development finance, so on and so forth, right? And again, what we find, and it's no surprise, for those of us that work in planning, that the largest area of specialized knowledge is land use regulation and zoning. Now again, keeping in mind that this is a survey of ads taken from what we consider to be mainstream planning job boards, right? But still, land use regulation and zoning, it gets asked for a lot in different ads. Community development housing gets asked for a lot, right? Dr. Ramsey Mussoff's in the audience, right? Probably no surprise. Housing, huge, right? Planning, law, and code enforcement, second years, have taken that class here. And economic development, what I do. But I think part of the takeaway from this isn't necessarily just to focus on which ones are the largest, because just like with skills, most ads ask for many different areas of specialized knowledge. There's no one that's just completely dominant. Even land use, which is the top one, appears in less than 50% of all of our ads. The other, let's just say 55 to 60% of the ads don't mention land use. They mention other things. And these things come in combination with one another. So they'll ask for land use and economic development. They'll ask for community development and transportation, right? So there's things that go together in pairs. And so I'm probably taking up a lot of time, but kind of back to this issue of what does this mean for professional identity? Because the issue of professional identity is important to planners because we're often faced with these questions of like, well, what is a planner? And then we have to explain ourselves to people. And we also are ambassadors of our profession, right? I'm sending a bunch of you to conference, well, you're sending yourselves, but I'm encouraging you, right? And you are an ambassador of the profession, right? When you go out into the community, people want to know, what is a planner, what do you do, right? And this has always been a hard thing for planners. And so part of our approach, not just in looking at skills and knowledge, is to understand what makes a planner a planner. And there's really two ways that we do this in the, it's what we call the skilled content analysis literature, which I've done a lot of work in, right? You can look for those skills that we call defining or distinguishing skills. So within any particular occupation, there is a group of skills that are often very uniquely specified to that occupation. And those are the ones that the occupation often becomes associated with, right? I don't want to pick on Marcelina, but architects, right? There's a certain set of skills. They might not be exclusive to architects, but they are specialized to architects, and that becomes those skills that kind of define what it means to be an architect, right? And landscape architects. Do I have any landscape architects in the room? I see at least one right in front of me. Similarly, there's things that kind of come to define what landscape architects do. Those are what we call distinguishing skills or defining skills. And then we also have skills that, within planning, we have these different specializations. So we also look for what we call necessary or cross-functional skills. So in planning, there's transportation planning, economic development planning, land use planning. What are the things that are common across those specializations? Right? Those are what we call cross-functional skills, right? So when we're trying to define occupations or characterize them, we kind of characterize skills into these two different groups, right? The ones that might be very unique to a subdiscipline, like if we were going to say, what are the defining skills of a transportation planner? And how is that different than the defining skills of an economic development planner, right? Versus, what do economic development planners and transportation planners both need to know? So I'm not going to go into this because I know it's a lot. I just put this on here to set up for the next couple slides. Going up and down, right? These are my specializations. This is the specialized knowledge areas, okay, that show up in the ads. Going across, those are the major skill groups that I talked about at the beginning of the thing. The color coding, the darker the color, the more intense that specialization matches with that skill group, okay? Rather than looking at all of those, we pulled out some of the big specializations in planning, right? So, obviously land use, economic development, community development, environmental planning, and transportation. Right? And so what, as far as like defining skills, those would be the ones that only show up in one of these. The cross-functional skills show up heavy on all, or on many, right? If I was just going to kind of look across here and we'll do economic development, it's like, okay, the skills that are very important to economic development seem to be budgeting and finance, and I can tell you that's very true, right? From spending a career in economic development, we spend a lot of time looking at money. Unless you do it in Maine, and then it's like you're looking at how much money you don't have. Seriously. Initiative and leadership, right? That seems to be a quality that they're often looking for in economic developers. Organization and staff management kind of goes along with that. Project management goes along with that, right? Land use, right? Let's look at land use. Some of the big ones that stick out. Organization staff management seems to be a big one, initiative and leadership as well. Office productivity technology, so that's like knowing Microsoft Excel, right? Or, something like that, right? Public speaking comes up a lot. And research and investigation, right? And because we were expecting a mixed audience, not just planners, but landscape architects and some other people, the other part of it is what makes planners different than other related jobs, like architects or landscape architects, right? or public policy people. Now, again, these are people that posted jobs for, let's just say, landscape architects in predominantly planning-dominated job boards. But there was still, because we have enough observations, we could still pull those out, right? So it might look a little bit different, Theo, if we were pulling ads out of, a landscape architecture-focused job board, right? I think that's probably where we're going with some of this. But let's look at landscape architecture, right? So what are the big things that code on landscape architecture? Well, graphic design and design software shows up. That's not really a big surprise, but that's different than what we saw for most of the planning specializations, right? And I'm not saying that graphic design isn't important to planning, it's just not mentioned as much very directly in the ads as it is compared to landscape architecture, right? Organization, staff management shows up, public speaking, and, research and investigation as well, Now, when we're looking across all of these, we'll say related areas that are a little bit outside of planning, one of my big takeaways from this is that we actually look at planning, the major planning focused specializations, and you compare them to these. The closest cousin of planning is actually public policy and administration. That's where we overlap a lot. So Alex Cox, raise your hand, right? Dual degree, public policy, and planning person. And that's also somewhat my background as well. It's not me just cooking the numbers to make that happen. They are closely related, right? At least in terms of the skills that employers are looking for. So is this where I turn it back over to you?
Depends on how you're feeling, but sure.
I'll turn it back over because I feel like I've talked for way too long.
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you, Henry, for that explanation of what we did. It seems like it, when you presented, it seems more fun than it might have actually been. So there's a variety of audiences for whom this information could be very useful, right? So on the one hand, Henry mentioned this idea that we can distinguish the planner's identity based on the skills that planners have to use and the content knowledge that we have to have from other professions is really important. And one of the reasons that's really important is because if you don't know what a profession does, or if in comparison to, say, architecture, which really owns a specific set of skills, it's really hard to recruit new people to the profession and advocate on behalf of your profession for resources, right? We're sort of seeing some threats to planning along those dimensions when we think about computer scientists are now doing planning, civil engineers are now doing planning, and we want to be able to say, like, yes, you are using some skills that are relevant to planning, but you are not a planner, and this is how we know. This is combination of skills that makes a planner a planner. So one audience for this work is practicing planners and people who care about distributing resources among different professions. Another audience is those of us in the room who are students, who are potentially training to be planners. Obviously, we need to know this if we're going to go out in the job market and get a planning job. And then the third audience is those of us who are educating planners. And for us, it's really important to know this so that our programs can keep pace with the skill and content demands of the profession, and so that we can assure you that we are training you for these entry-level positions in a way that makes sense given the job market for your skills. So I'd like to introduce you to someone you all may know. This is Fern. And Fern, at various times in this department, has played various roles, but Fern has gone back to school. Fern was once a municipal staff person or a planner, and now Fern is a planning student. And Fern is saying, all right, Henry and Camille, what does this mean for me as a student, and am I doing the right things to prepare for the job market? So what we would tell Fern, or anyone in this room that would ask us this question, is that all planners require a combination of technical and communication skills along with some planning-specific content knowledge. Focusing on these planning-specific skills, GIS, etc., is important, but so is focusing on your organizational, professional, writing, and communication skills. And as you prepare for the job market, we want you to look for the opportunities to demonstrate how you've combined, as Henry called them, technical and soft skills through your work here at UMass, right? When you talk about the studio projects you did, can you also talk about how you demonstrated leadership, practiced public speaking, exhibited your mastery over writing or conducting public engagement and distilling technical information for people who don't necessarily have the same background as you, right? However, caveat that entry level is different from senior level in terms of the skills required and what we saw in the job ads. And this is just a polite reminder to you all. A lot of you get into the job market and you say, oh my gosh, UMass didn't teach me all these things that I need to know about being a planner. And our review of the job ads really underscores the fact that most employers understand you're going to be learning a lot of the soft skills on the job. And that's okay. That's what entry-level positions are for. So for the other ferns in the audience, the ferns who are faculty members, you might be saying, some of this is really intuitive and makes sense with how I've understood, my role as an educator in planning, but are we teaching the right skills or content knowledge here at UMass? How can we be sure that we are moving at the same pace as the job market, and is that important to the work we're doing? And when Henry and I were trying to think about the audience of faculty members who might end up reading this paper and using this in curriculum development or teaching, one of the things that we felt confident in saying is that the Planning Accreditation Board requirements for accredited planning programs really are our guardrails. And they do a pretty good job of ensuring that our accredited planning programs are offering the right mix of content and skill development to our students. But we also would encourage those of us in the room who are educators to look for opportunities to integrate professional development skills into our assignments. And this is especially important for our core curriculum, even though these are asked for less for entry-level planning positions. The other thing to know, especially as we are trying to advocate for our profession, is that planning is not one thing. There isn't one specific skill that makes a planner, but planning is very diverse and planners do many things with many overlapping skills and content knowledge. And then, as Henry mentioned, more than half of the ads don't even mention the things that we commonly associate with core planning knowledge. For example, land use. So that might change the way we think about some of the overarching curriculum choices we make. That being said, PAB is still doing a good job of keeping us in check. So I will end it there, and I hope that we can have some questions from those of you in the room, either faculty or students, because I think many of you have a lot to offer to this conversation, and if you would like to read a copy of this paper, hopefully in the next few months we'll be able to share it. And thank you for coming.